If someone told you that in a remote American countryside, more than a dozen adults were besieged all night long by a group of goblins from outer space, would you believe it? In the summer of 1955, in the small town of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, that's exactly what happened. That night, a quiet farmhouse on the edge of town turned into something like a siege between humans and unknown creatures. Gunshots rang out, terrified screams filled the air. Strange lights flickered outside, and figures with translucent skin, oversized ears, and glowing eyes launched attacks against the people inside. The bizarre nature of the incident spread quickly through the community, and in the decades that followed, it became one of the most mysterious, unsolved cases in America's paranormal history. This wasn't some drunken tall tale, nor was it a publicity stunt cooked up by a local newspaper. The Hopkinsville incident has endured in American paranormal lore precisely because there was simply too much evidence left behind, far beyond what could be dismissed as rumor. The witnesses weren't just one family, but more than a dozen adults, and their testimonies matched up with striking consistency, with hardly any contradictions. And when the police arrived at the scene that very night, they recorded hard evidence: spent shell casings, shattered windows, holes blasted into the roof, and even strange scratches and markings on the ground. These cold physical traces made it impossible to wave the story away as nothing more than hallucinations. What made it even more unsettling was the atmosphere of the 1950s in America, a time when UFO sightings were being reported across the country with alarming frequency. Newspapers were running stories almost every other day. Farmers saw strange lights hovering over their fields. Drivers spotted metallic discs flying low over highways, and some people even claimed they'd been briefly abducted by beings from another world. The reports piled up so quickly that the U.S. Air Force created Project Blue Book just to investigate the flood of sightings. It was in this climate that the Hopkinsville Goblins incident exploded, seeming to echo the strange phenomena in the skies and leading many to wonder, were the Goblins of Hopkinsville really alien visitors stepping out of a UFO? So what exactly happened that night in Hopkinsville? The story begins on the evening of August 21st, 1955, a hot, humid summer night. The setting was a farmhouse near the tiny village of Kelly, just outside Hopkinsville, Kentucky. The house was surrounded by acres of cornfields and dense woods. As dusk fell, the sound of insects filled the air, and dogs barked in the distance. Aside from those natural sounds, the night was so still, it felt oppressive. The farmhouse wasn't very large, but that night it held 11 people, including the Sutton family and some of their friends. It was a simple summer gathering. Inside the house, adults chatted and laughed, children played on the wooden floor, and a few grown-ups rocked lazily in their chairs, soaking in the peace of the countryside. No one had the faintest idea that this ordinary summer evening was about to become one of the strangest chapters in America's paranormal history. Around 7:30 that evening, a young man in the house, Billy Ray Taylor, went out to the backyard to fetch some water. He pushed open the creaking wooden door, and just as he bent down to lift the bucket from the well, something caught his eye. Out of the corner of his vision, he suddenly noticed a blazing light streaking across the night sky. But that light didn't look like any ordinary shooting star. It didn't vanish quickly. Instead, it dragged a long, glowing trail as it slowly moved across the sky. What's more, there was a strange metallic shimmer glinting off of it, as if some kind of massive, clumsy aircraft was gliding low overhead. Billy froze right there, his eyes locked on the light. After a moment, he saw clearly that the light wasn't burning up high above like a meteor. Instead, it plummeted downward, accompanied by a deep rumbling boom, and finally disappeared into the woods. Terrified, Billy dropped the bucket and ran back inside, shoving open the door and gasping for breath. The people inside were still laughing and chatting, unaware that anything unusual was happening outside. But Billy's wide-eyed, panicked expression gave him away. Practically shouting, he said, "I just saw a flying saucer crash into the woods." Everyone burst out laughing at his words. At first, nobody believed him. They just thought Billy was seeing things. But only a short while later, the farmhouse dog suddenly went wild, barking furiously as if it had caught the scent of danger. Following the direction of the barking, the group looked out toward the edge of the darkening fields. There they saw something strange moving quickly toward the farmhouse, and when the creatures got close enough, the people finally saw what they really looked like. They were short, no more than 3 feet tall, with long, skinny limbs and skin that gleamed with a silvery glow. Each had a bizarre, oversized head, pointed ears, and 2 glowing green eyes like light bulbs, eyes that seemed to pierce straight through the dark and stab into your soul. Their movements were unnervingly light and silent, almost as if they weighed nothing. Just as the Sutton family was still reeling in shock, one of the creatures suddenly leapt high into the air, its body bending unnaturally, and landed right on the farmhouse roof. From above came a strange, chattering, creaking sound, like they were signaling to one another. Faced with this sudden threat, everyone inside was terrified. The men of the Sutton family immediately grabbed shotguns and rifles, aiming at the creatures outside and pulling the triggers out of pure reflex. The flashes of gunfire lit up the night. They clearly saw the bullets hit the creatures' bodies. But shockingly, no blood came out. Instead, the creatures only stumbled back a few steps under the impact, before flipping and tumbling back up with an almost weightless grace. Their bodies bent like rubber, and the spots where bullets had struck seemed to heal instantly. Then they kept on advancing toward the house. Even stranger, they didn't move like humans walking upright. It was more like they were gliding through the air, with a floating, weightless quality, almost like astronauts drifting in low gravity. The sight nearly drove everyone inside to the breaking point. The women screamed and clutched their children tight, while the kids cried so hard their faces turned pale. The men kept firing their guns while also scrambling to lock every door and window. For the next few hours, more and more of those creatures showed up in groups. Some climbed onto the roof looking for a way in. Some pressed their claws against the windows, their glowing green eyes staring directly inside. Others dangled half their bodies down from the eaves, stretching their long arms toward the door cracks, as if trying to pry it open and force their way inside. The men of the farmhouse kept shooting at them, the gunfire exploding in the otherwise silent night. But the bullets seemed completely useless. Every shot only made the creatures back away for a moment. No blood, no bodies. Their forms seemed more like some kind of strange energy shells, something not of this world at all. Even by midnight, the terrifying siege of the farmhouse by those creatures hadn't stopped. Several times the Suttons tried to rush outside, but every time they were driven back in by the sight of those glowing green eyes lurking just beyond the door. The only thing they could do was brace the doors with all their strength, reloading their guns with trembling hands. In that moment, the house itself was the only barrier standing between them and the unknown beings. Finally, after enduring until the early hours of the morning, the creatures' harassment gradually eased. Outside, the night slowly returned to silence, as if nothing had ever happened. Seizing this brief moment of calm, the Sutton family and their friends stumbled and staggered their way to the nearest police station. At first, the police didn't fully believe their story about a monster attack, suspecting that the group had simply been frightened into experiencing some sort of collective hallucination. But when officers followed the Suttons back to the farmhouse, what they found was far more serious than they expected. The windows really did have claw marks on them. The roof was scraped and damaged in multiple places. The ground around the house was littered with spent shells and pockmarked with bullet holes. The dog was still cowering in a corner, too terrified to go near the fields. As for the strange creatures, they had vanished without a trace before the police arrived. No blood, no bodies, no remains of any kind to prove they had ever been there, as if the entire ordeal had been nothing but a nightmare. Yet the physical evidence right in front of them made it impossible to dismiss everything as mere illusion. From that night on, the Sutton family never again dared to live alone on that farmland. The very next day, local reporters rushed to the farmhouse to interview the Suttons, who claimed to have encountered the Goblins. Newspaper headlines soon screamed sensational lines like, "Farmhouse shootout with Goblins," and "Mysterious creatures attack Kentucky farm." For a time, Hopkinsville became the center of national attention. But what followed wasn't sympathy, it was ridicule and doubt. Many dismissed the story as nothing more than a group of country folks drunk and hallucinating. Others claimed that a traveling circus had passed through the area that night. and the so-called goblins were probably just escaped monkeys or some other small animals. Even the U.S. military sent investigators to look into the case, but soon after, the matter was quietly dropped. As time went on, the Hopkinsville Goblin incident gradually grew from a piece of local news into a classic case in American UFO culture. Many UFO researchers believe the small beings weren't goblins at all, but passengers from an alien spacecraft. Their way of gliding as they moved, their apparent immunity to bullets, and their glowing eyes in the night all seemed to match the UFO lore circulating at the time. What's even more interesting is that this incident had a deep and lasting impact on American alien culture. After the 1950s, science fiction novels and movies increasingly featured images of small aliens, with big heads, large eyes, long thin limbs, and strange movements, almost identical to the descriptions of the Hopkinsville Goblins. The famous movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial and the later Gray Alien archetype can both be traced back to this cultural origin. In other words, the Hopkinsville incident wasn't just a paranormal tale. It actually shaped the very image Americans came to associate with aliens. But after decades passed, the townspeople's attitude toward the event went through a subtle change. At first, they were ashamed to talk about it, afraid of being mocked by outsiders. Later, as alien culture became mainstream, the Hopkinsville Goblin incident turned into a kind of local symbol. The town even started hosting the Kelly Little Green Men Days Festival, celebrating that strange night in festival form. Tourists flocked in, local merchants sold goblin souvenirs, and the town's economy began to benefit.